This next section is about Ayurveda and the elements and the doshas. It's a very important aspect of Ayurveda, and we're going to get into that information right now. The physician to the Dalai Lama has a great quote. Health is the proper relationship between the microcosm, which is man, and the macrocosm, which is the universe. Disease is a disruption of this relationship. Okay, so in Ayurveda, and this is going to be a real summary of Ayurveda. We could talk about this for hours and days and months. So this is a very concise summary of it, and hopefully you'll get a real basic understanding of it. Ayurveda is composed of unlimited amounts of information, but it sums up in many ways to the 5 elements and what's called the 3 doshas. The 5 elements are ether, air, fire, water, and earth. And these are the elements that make up everything. In fact, everything in the universe is said to be made up of a combination of these 5 elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. A dosha actually means a disease tendency. So the idea is that a dosha is a constitutional tendency or an imbalance that we all have. Everybody has a particular dosha. What that basically means is that we all come in with an elemental imbalance. Okay, so Vata means movement, or it's the tendency of the air and the ether element to get out of balance. Pitta is a tendency for the fire-water element to get out of balance. And Kapha is a tendency for the water and earth tendency to get out of balance. So we're going to go into more of that in a minute. A couple principles in Ayurveda is that like increases like. So foods, tastes, sensory impressions, activities, thoughts, moods, actions, weather, environments, activities, herbs, spices, all will impact us in a certain way. So for instance, if it's a very hot day and you go outside at 12 noon, the hottest time of day, and you eat chili peppers, which are very hot, guess what? It's going to increase the heat. Like increases like. If you go outside on a cold, windy day and you don't have a scarf on and you are driving in your car and you open the windows and the wind comes in, it's going to increase the cold and windiness experience and how it impacts the body. So the elements all have qualities, which we're going to go into in a minute. So if you have an imbalance of fire, which it means if you have too much heat in the body, the Ayurvedic principle would be not to increase that by adding things in life that increase heat, whether it's dietary, lifestyle practices, emotional habits, and things like that. You want to minimize those things, which we'll explain more of. Opposites diminish. So if you're very hot, something cold will diminish that heat. Very simple. So the 3 doshas, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. Vata is related mostly to the air element, Pitta most related to the fire element, and Kapha mostly related to the water element. So the Vata people, okay, what I'm going to do is describe a Vata body type, a Vata personality. And usually we're all a combination of all 3. In fact, there's 7 possibilities of the 3 doshas. However, we tend to predominate in one area. The area that we predominate in is what is called our dosha. And that is a thing that we are meant to focus on and accept about ourselves and balance throughout our life. So for instance, if somebody is very pitta, which means potentially irritable, rather than saying, well, why am I like that? What's wrong with me? And not accept that about yourself, Ayurveda says, accept that you tend to get fiery, accept that you tend to get irritable, but balance it. Figure out in life what balance it. So let's just go back to Vata. So Vata, the body type, tends to be wiry, bony. They tend to move quick. Their complexion tends to be darker, and their mind is usually filled with lots of ideas. Their condition tends to be one of getting stressed or anxious quite easily, hyperactive, nervous, fearful, Physically, they may tend to get gassy, irregular in their digestion, irregular in their eating and their sleeping and their eliminating. They may tend to get ear problems. And the benefit of Vata, or the air element, is that it allows for agility, adaptability. They have a lot of enthusiasm, a very energetic mind. So that's the good side. The bad side is there tends to be a lot of anxiety. Okay. Now, a Pitta body type tends to be medium build. They tend to have a strong appetite. They tend to be the people that have oily scalps and bald quite easily. They can be sharp-tempered. They tend to be warm-blooded. Type A, tendency toward a yellowish tint to the skin and even to the teeth also. The negative condition with Pitta tends to be redness or inflammation type problems, burning pains, heated. Also, they can be quite passionate and they can get angry or critical. This is a fiery type person. They tend to be good leaders, or they can be very controlling. Now, the positive aspect of Pitta is that they tend to have very good sight. And that doesn't just mean physical, but it means vision for planning and seeing things clearly. Their metabolism tends to be very good. Strong digestion. Their intelligence tends to be very strong, perceptive. They can be very good judges of things, or they have very strong discrimination. So if you have a good person who's a Pitta, they tend to be very good leaders. Now, a Kapha body type tends to be large-boned, pale white skin, large white teeth, big eyes. They tend to have the most beautiful eyes, but they tend to be overweight. They tend to have slow metabolism, and they tend to be slow-moving and slow-thinking. The negative condition of Kapha is that there tends to be a lot of mucus with Kapha. They tend toward lung problems, constipation, sluggish. They may feel heavy. They may have a lot of sort of desires and attachments, a lack of forward movement in life. They tend to hold on. They want to keep things the way they are. That's the tendency of Kapha. Some Kaphas can look at a bowl of ice cream and gain a few pounds without even eating it. Now, the positive Kapha is that they tend to have very strong structural form in their body. They tend toward being kind, calm, feeling, emotional, stable. They tend to be very generous also. So there's both positive and negative aspects. In fact, you can say that your dosha is both your blessing and your curse. If you learn to accept your dosha, your fault tendency, and work with it, it tends to be a strength. If you resist it and fight it and dislike yourself because of it, then it becomes a problem. So things that increase Vata, that's the air element, are dry, cold, windy weather, irregular habits. So for someone who's very Vata, who tends toward anxiety, having regular habits of eating, sleeping, exercise, meditation, yoga. Stress and fear is a big problem for Vata people. So raw, dry, cold foods. Vatas generally do not do super well with a raw food diet, especially in colder climates. Aging itself is considered a Vata condition, and dawn or dusk. That means whether neither here nor there, any situation for a Vata, moving or big changes, changing a job, anything like that creates a Vata experience, so it's very challenging for a Vata person. What calms Vata? Warmth, any kind of warm food, a warm environment, like a cozy, safe, nourishing environment. Oil on the skin is very important for Vata, and even eating healthy oils. Anything that creates calmness, regularity, regular habits, the sweet, sour, and salty taste is supportive of Vata. Any kind of flowing exercise, swimming is really good. Smooth flowing yoga is very good. Meditation is really great for Vata. What increases Pitta? Meaning when we say increase it, creates an imbalance. Lots of heat, whether it's food, drink, weather, the season summer. Lots of oil and salt will also increase Vata. Spicy, salty, sour foods, lying in the sun, being too much in the sun, too much work. Pittas tend to be workaholics. They tend to push, 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 push. Not enough pleasure in life. And middle age itself is when people tend to push. that tends to aggravate pittas most significantly. Now, what calms a pitta? What pacifies it? Cooling foods and environments, that which cools you down, whether it cools the body or cools the head. Bitter, astringent, and sweet foods are cooling. Doing less, enjoyment, moon walks. Pitta, the moon is considered cooling and the sun is considered heating. Walking in the moon at night under the stars. Doing less means like having a time in the day where they just chill out. Enjoyment is actually very important for Pitta because they need to just let go of their hyper or tendency towards workaholism and focus and intensity. They need that downtime just to chill out. What increases Kapha? Inactivity or stagnation. The damp, wet weather in the spring will increase Kapha. Heavy foods, especially dairy and sugar, horrible for Kaphas, horrible for people that are very sedentary and overweight and have mucus problems. Dairy and sugar, stay away from it. Sweet, sour, salty, fatty foods, not so good for Kapha. Iced foods and drinks will also be negative for Kapha. And childhood is a Kapha time of life, meaning it's when babies are round and soft and mushy and they tend to be mucousy, so it's considered a Kapha time of life. What pacifies or calms Kapha? Vigorous exercise and activity. For Kaphas, it's very important that they exercise vigorously. Light foods, eating lightly is very important. Spicy, bitter, astringent foods, staying active and staying out of ruts. The tendency for Kapha is to get into ruts and bad habits, or just ruts that maybe one time were a good habit but aren't good anymore. They need change in activity and movement. So Vatas, the organ that it most impacts really is the large intestine. So gas and bloating and that type of thing is very much related to Vata. Pitta, it impacts the small intestine and the liver. And the liver, it said, holds anger. Okay, so very important to support those organs if you're a Pitta in particular. And Kapha, the organs that get most imbalanced are the chest, the lungs, and the upper stomach. The lungs tend to get mucousy with Kapha. Now in Ayurvedic nutrition, we'll just bring a piece of this in, it's very important to know that it's based on the 6 tastes. What that means is that rather than looking at nutrients, we're really meant to have a wide variety of tastes, like sweet, sour, salty, bitter, pungent, astringent. Having a healthy diet means that if you have all those tastes in your diet, you will basically be getting all the nutrition. A lot of what happens in our culture, in the West especially, is that we overemphasize something. We might have too much sour, or a lot of us are way addicted to way too much sweet. Eventually that will create a significant imbalance in our life. Now, diet will affect the constitution, like I said. Too much sweet will affect Kapha. Too much sour will affect Pitta. Too much dry, or like things like popcorn, dry foods, will impact Vata. So food will really impact us. And once you've done the cleanse, you can really start to learn what your particular dosha is and fine-tune your diet so that you're eating according to your body type, which is really, really effective. I'd like to just touch on another Ayurvedic principle called the 6 stages of disease. And this is an important point. A lot of times what will happen is that we will eat food and will absorb toxins in our life, and it will begin to create some kind of stress. That stress accumulates in the intestinal tract, usually in the small intestine and the large intestine. Now, what happens is that begins the process of disease. And a lot of times in the West, we don't think of it this way. So it sits in the intestines, and then over time, the intestines start to, there tends to be an aggravation or an inflammation in the intestinal tract. So now what happens is that inflammation then overflows into the body, into the bloodstream. We might even call that in our culture leaky gut, where toxins from the gut start getting into the bloodstream. It overflows, and then it literally relocates to other areas of the body. So in Ayurveda, we say that a lot of joint pains, ankle pains, arthritises, lots of the itises are actually due to the overflow of toxins from the gut that have now relocated into other joints. You can literally have sore hands because of an intestinal problem. And then symptoms start to manifest. like I said, arthritis, and then eventually complications. So then we have an arthritis situation that's very serious and the person can't do anything, so now they have to take all kinds of drugs and medications, which then cause toxins in the gut and continues the whole cycle, the whole process. One other point before we end this part on the doshas in Ayurveda is that there's something called the three gunas, or the three qualities, which we mentioned before, but they are tamas, or ignorance, rajas, or passion or activity, and sattva, or goodness. I'd like to just touch on sattva. Sattva means harmony or balance. In Ayurveda and in the Total Life Cleanse, one of the things that we really emphasize is reconnecting to harmony or balance. In fact, it's said in Ayurveda that it's impossible to be healthy if we don't, on a regular basis, reconnect to the smooth, harmonious, balanced energy that's potential in us. It doesn't mean we have to be there 24 hours a day, but we need to reconnect to that. When we do reconnect to that, the body can start to rejuvenate and heal itself, not just the body, but also the mind and the spirit. So what increases sattva, or that very, very essential, important balance in our life? Number one is spending time in nature. Nature inherently is sattvic. How often do we walk in the woods? We may be upset, bad mood, stressed out. We go for a nice 20-minute walk in the woods and we feel much better. Or we go for a nice walk on the ocean, we feel much better. Spending time in nature is very healing, very powerful, because it increases sattva. It nourishes the sattva inside of us. Eating sattvic foods like rice, ghee, coconut oil, vegetables, fruit, sesame seeds are very sattvic. Pure, organic, natural, whole foods, primarily of plant-based origin, are all sattvic. Taking in sattvic impressions, that means being in nature, or beautiful, natural, harmonious, calming, uplifting, and inspiring impressions through the senses, whether that's through music, through a book, through scenery, through art, whatever it may be. But taking in those types of impressions are very healing also. Limiting the media. In the cleanse, we have the media fast, which we've talked about, which minimizes negative impressions. Self-reflection, meditation, yoga. The essence of the mind, in fact, is sattvic, is good. Now, goodness is another translation for sattvic. So literally doing good things, doing good to others will actually enhance sattva in us and in other people too. So therefore, taking the middle and the ethical path in our lives. So foods also have these qualities. Foods that are nutritionally worthless, stale, rancid, tasteless, impure, and toxic, which is a large amount of foods in most supermarkets. A ton of them are worthless, impure, and toxic. Those are foods tamasic. They are ignorant forming. They cause ignorance. They are very bad for the body, but ultimately they will impact the state of our consciousness, of our mind, by eating these types of foods. Foods that are very bitter, sour, salty, dry, and burning, and I say very, I mean a high amount, give rise to pain, grief, and disease. These are called rajasic foods. These are foods that are overly stimulating, and eventually they will cause a lot of distress in the body and will make the mind overly agitated. Foods that promote longevity, enthusiasm, strength, good health, happiness, satisfaction, that are tasty, nourishing, and agreeable to the heart and the stomach are considered sattvic. Okay, and this is from right out of the Bhagavad Gita, the ancient yoga text from India.